but we know that the first responders are trying to get to anyone who needs it. There are some patients, though, Fallon, that we've just learned that are at Louisville Hospital.
This is coming to you from Louisville, Kentucky. Explosion on Painter Street.
They are prepared for any more patients that might come into the emergency room.
We got a 1 mile radius clear. You know, you can't cut. If you, they got shelters in place within a 1 mile radius. This is on WDRB TV, which is channel 41, which is Fox, Louisville, Kentucky.
On your screen, you have to believe that something.
I'm bringing it to you because an explosion, in case you know somebody that lives in the area.
We pray for them and hope that the best possible outcome, because just devastating looking at that image right there.
Listen, I've been reporting Louisville for a very long time. We know when we see these moments that are the worst, that our first responders in the city are at their best. You think back to the mass shooting a couple of years ago, or in 2023, and how we saw officers run into the scene, firefighters trying to triage and to help the wounded as fast as possible. So as many dark and devastating days that I have seen and covered in Louisville, we know that the people who can provide help are trying to do it just as fast as possible right now.
And we've seen that on display. I mean, the live shot with Richard behind him, all those emergency vehicles, emergency management, ambulances, fire department, police, all these first responders coming to the scene to come into danger. You know, when they say there's a 1 mile radius and a shelter in place, these people are going into that radius.
And we know that that 1 mile radius, so the extent of the weight of that blast goes far beyond that 1 mile radius. We just
you see some trains there. I don't know what kind of
Preston, the Camp Taylor
place that is,
miles away, who felt the blast at their home. I mean, this was a mighty explosion.
This is there in Louisville, Kentucky,
screen with that gaping hole
about
in the middle
25 miles south of me.
It is Givaudan Sense Color, which is a food coloring plant that has operations all over the world, but is headquartered here in Louisville, Kentucky.
And primarily focused, it sounds like, on the caramel coloring that we see in our beverages. We have just learned that in the next 20 minutes, there will be a briefing from officials to kind of give us an idea of what happened here at the Givaudan plant with this explosion that happened about 45 minutes ago when we came on air to inform you all of what happened, because a lot of people here heard this explosion. Windows were blown out from far away places. Highlands were
Camp Taylor neighborhood. So the Highlands is about 2 miles away. Camp Taylor's considerably further than that. That's 264 and Preston.
Right.
So I mean, we're on the other side of, you know, the 64 is pretty close to where this is in the Clifton neighborhood. You're going to take 64, then get on 264 and wind around a little bit. That's I'm not a GPS here, but that's at least 5 miles away that people are reporting feeling this blast. Now we're starting to get responses. We saw the mayor out at the scene. We saw the police chief out at the scene. The governor has just responded. I understand that he put out a tweet, and if we can put it up on your screen, we'll read it together at the same time. It says that Kentucky, there are reports of a hazardous materials incident at the 1900 block of Payne Street in Louisville. For those in the area, please follow guidance from local officials while responders work to secure the area. Oh, and when you put it on the right-hand side of your screen from where I'm sitting, it's a little bit harder to see, but the end of that last sentence saying that Brittany and I are praying for the safety of all involved.
Richard Essex has been following this developing story since he got out there.
1901 Payne Street in Louisville,
He is
Kentucky.
speaking to another person in that area. Richard?
Yeah, Heather Graves and her partner, you guys live right down the street, is that right?
Yes.
And this is right in your backyard.
Yes.
How did you find out about this?
We found out through our Ring camera, initially just with notifications of a loud boom, everybody asking what it was, and then we did receive footage from police force knocking on our door, seeing if anybody was home.
So that's got to be kind of alarming when you see the police knocking on your door.
Oh, I mean, I had no idea. I wasn't even paying attention to the initial notifications because you just don't think that it's happening right behind you.
Now, that plant, it's right in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever smelled anything or anything?
No.
Not really. Well, you get an occasional smell from time to time, but nothing we would think to be concerned about.
Are you guys okay?
What does the EPA say to this,
Worried
people?
about our dog, Benny. Just
Hope the house is okay and hope the dog's okay.
And your neighbors, have you had a chance to check on them?
We called the next door neighbor. They're in the same boat. Both of those folks are away from home. They also have pets at the house and really just worried on if the pets are okay and when we can get back home.
How long have you guys been in the house?
2 years.
2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so be something to certainly remember.
Yeah.
Now we saw some of your other neighbors that live a little bit further down that they let go up. They're making them come back. Have they said anything to you yet about you can go up and check?
They, because the building was in the 1900s and the explosion happened in the 1900s, they don't have an update because our driveway backs up to where they park. So.
Wow, that close. And have your Ring doorbells shown you what the back looks like?
We don't have it in the back.
All in front.
That's what
All
you
right,
need,
well, good luck.
cameras in the
I'm
front,
thinking
back,
about you
and
guys.
all four
I guess
corners.
the police are going to let you over. When they let you go, they'll be right over there. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Take care. Well, there you go. I mean, the plant was right in their backyard. They found out when their Ring doorbell started going off and through some alerts that they received on their phone. Now they're waiting to get back through. Now, the young lady that we talked to earlier, Hannah, she was part of a group of people that were allowed to go up to their house, but police are going to ask them to come back as soon as they get a chance. Now, we'll be talking to some of those people when they get back up here, back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Richard, thank you for the update. We'll come back to you soon. This happened, an explosion at Givaudan Sense Color at 1901 Payne Street sometime after 3 o'clock this afternoon. 1 mile shelter in place for those of you who are just tuning in. Gridlock kind of off Frankfurt Avenue as it's caused a traffic mess. And the picture, this is a live look on the left-hand side of your screen of the damage that has been left behind there. We have just obtained some 911 recordings from minutes after the listen together.
Fire with an explosion at 1901 Payne Street, across street of Sturgis Avenue. We've gotten several calls. We have smoke coming from the rear of the location.
Be advised, we have traffic signals out, up and down Main Street and Market Street.
Traffic signals out on Main Street and Market Street after
It must bleed some
and
transformers.
Really it felt for several miles away.
People calling 911, hearing this explosion, feeling this explosion. A lot of people were found out about this explosion from their Ring doorbell cameras, alerting them to what had happened, not only feeling it, but also seeing it on their cameras. We also want to head out to Stefan Johnson, who is on Frankfurt Avenue, talking to businesses there who may have had their windows blown out from this explosion. Stefan, what are you seeing there?
Good afternoon, guys. As Gilbert said, several miles away. We're a couple of blocks over from Payne Street here on Frankfurt and Vernon Avenue. This is the Osaka Sushi Bar. And behind me, you can see
I know where that is.
Board up a window that shattered. They were inside. We talked to one of the waitresses, one of the hostesses inside. She said they thought somebody was shooting through the window. The glass just shattered, and then a customer came in from outside and told them about the explosion, and they all said they heard the bang, and then the next thing you know, this glass dropped to the ground. It was a pretty thick piece of glass. These two gentlemen have been outside boarding it up for the last 20 minutes or so since we've been here. Let me ask you real quick, real quick, did you feel it when the explosion happened?
I was upstairs on the second floor. I just heard a loud boom, so I just came down because I thought the gas exploded something on a restaurant.
Yeah.
But I heard the explosion came from the other side of the street, so...
Yeah. Several blocks away, this glass wasn't thin. The lady inside said, how thick was it?
It was pretty loud. The whole building was shaking, so...
How thick was the glass? The glass window that shot it?
Almost 3/4 inches thick, so...
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time and talking to us. Again, we're on Vernon Avenue and Frankfurt Avenue, the intersection here. This is a couple of blocks over from Payne Street where that explosion happened. Later on today on WDRB, we will hear from some of the witnesses who were walking inside and some of the employees who were inside when this explosion actually happened, guys.
All right, Stefan, thank you for that update. We mentioned earlier how there had been an explosion at this facility before. We have gone into our archives and can show you that footage now. We're going to take a look at it together. It was April 11th, 2001 at April 11th, 2003 at what was then called the D.D. Williamson & Co. company, same food coloring manufacturing plant. What the final report that came out years later said is that the explosion damaged the western end of the facility and released 26,000 pounds of ammonia, forcing evacuations as many as 26 residents and requiring 1,500 people to shelter in place. One person died. The feed tank, the summary found, most likely failed as a result of
21 years ago, people, this was.
Which generated excessive pressure. This investigation was done by the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazardous Investigations Board. It determined that DDW did not have effective programs in place to determine if equipment and processes met basic process and plant engineering requirements. So, long story short, cutting through the jargon here, it is saying that the accident in 2003 occurred because there wasn't proper processes in place. Here we are 21 years later, and the question that will be, were the processes put in place before this blast 21 years later?
I was saying no. What do you all think?
What's happening today in comparison to what happened then at the same time?
Right.
It is telling that we are seeing this massive blast happen.
People, this
on
happened about 3 o'clock
And
this
21 years
afternoon.
ago, we were at the same place.
On a
And
1900
that makes you
block
wonder,
of Payne
people in the neighborhood,
Street.
they said they were not fond of this plant being in their neighborhood, and well, an explosion happened in 2003. Another scary situation here in 2024. And when looking at some of that old video from 2003 on the right-hand side, we did see one snippet of video showing what may have been a possible train derailment as well from that explosion. And we did see a picture earlier in this broadcast when we joined you here on air, a picture sent to us from a viewer which looked like another train derailment right behind that facility. There we go. We see it right there on the right-hand side from 2003. Just the strength of this explosion felt far, far away, miles away, and the strength in the area too.
So, similarities, right? So there was a train there in 2003. There's a train there again 21 years later. We are seeing similarities. We are seeing injuries. At least there were 26 people that had to evacuate. We know that there's now a 1 mile shelter in place. There was 1,500 people who had to shelter in place back then. U of L Hospital has just confirmed that 6 patients are there. And emergency officials, I'm told, are walking up for a briefing right now. Let's listen to the latest information. That is Mayor Craig Greenberg.
Hey guys, does everyone have all their mics here? Is everyone, you guys ready to go? All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me say we're going to give you an update with what we know at this time. We'll try to answer some questions. We'll have another briefing later this evening when we know more. There are still a lot of unknowns. This is still an active scene, and so just please bear that in mind, a lot of unknowns. Earlier today at about 3 o'clock, emergency teams responded to an unknown explosion. The cause is unknown at the Givaudan facility a couple blocks behind us here on Payne Street. Many people in Louisville might know that as the former DDW plant. The name has since changed to Givaudan. Again, around 3 o'clock, there was an unknown explosion. The cause at this point of the explosion is unknown. At this point, everyone that we are aware of that was working currently that we're aware of have been accounted for. Louisville Fire Department rescued 2 individuals from the building. 11 individuals have been transported to local hospitals. All of those individuals that were transported to local hospitals were employees working in the plant. Just spoke to a couple members of that team that were inside there, and they have initially conveyed that everything was normal activity when the explosion occurred. We did put in place a 1-mile shelter-in-place radius. We have air monitoring on the scene right now, and all of the air monitoring is clear at this point in time. We expect to lift the 1-mile shelter-in-place radius soon, but for right now, please continue to err on the side of caution until we get the results that we're looking for, just to continue to be the way that they are. We hope to lift that soon. Please stay in touch with Louisville Fire Department, social media page, or others. We'll continue to keep the media abreast of that as well with respect to that we hope to. But notwithstanding that, please avoid the area if you can. Not because there's any danger, but there's still a lot of emergency personnel on the scene, around the scene, getting trucks to and from we need to have access to here. So please avoid this area around Frankfort Avenue and Payne Street as best as you can. There were a few houses surrounding the facility that were evacuated shortly after the explosion, but there are no additional evacuations planned at this time. We're working to get more details from the company so we can have more information on what was inside the facility, what chemicals might have been involved. We don't have that information at this time. This has been a lot of agencies immediately responded to this emergency. I want to give a giant thanks to all of the first responders. On the scene, there are a lot of members of the Louisville Fire Department that have been in the facility that are still working right now. Louisville Metro Police Department, our emergency management services, the state Homeland Security is with us here today, and the leader of that organization is here. Louisville Metro Health Department, ATF is with us. MSD, LG&E, we've been in touch with
ATF, what would they be there for?
Senator Paul and Senator McConnell's office as well. Everyone at the federal, state, and local levels have all offered any assistance that is necessary for us. I also want to thank Councilman Andrew Owen. We're in Councilman Owen's district, and he arrived at the scene very rapidly as well and is here with us today as we're responding. So again, just a giant thanks to all of those folks and the first responders that responded to this emergency situation here today. I'm going to turn it over to Louisville Fire Department.
I bet you all will hear from President Trump on this,
Executive
too.
Director of Emergency Management Services, Jody Myman, will say a few words.
Because he cares about his people.
Questions. All of us representatives of the agencies that I just described are here with us on scene. Again, we'll try to take some of your questions. We may not have answers yet. We expect to do another briefing later tonight when we hope to have more answers than we do right now. But first, let me turn it over to Chief Brian O'Neill from the Louisville Fire Department. Chief.
Thank you. So, as the mayor mentioned, the initial call came in right at 3 o'clock for an explosion. We sent a full box alarm. It's going to be 4 engines, 2 trucks, a battalion chief. They came to the area. They found that there had clearly been an explosion. They saw the type of plant that they'd be dealing with. So we need to understand this is not only a fire run, this is a structural collapse run, and this is a hazardous materials run. Fortunately, Louisville Fire handles all of those disciplines. We got extra personnel coming on that. We hit a second alarm, made sure all the hazardous material teams were on the way as well. Plant personnel did an amazing job with their emergency action plan to get get most of the people out. Once our firefighters arrived, they did make an aggressive interior attack. We had one person that was pinned. We were able to get them out, rescue them, as well as assist the others in evacuation. EMS was on scene to help out with transportation immediately to area hospitals. There's at least 8 patients that I know of that had to be transported. There may have been more by now. Once we got the fire knocked down, we immediately also started air monitoring for the immediate area. You may have heard that there was an evacuation. That was a precautionary measure that was done immediately because we didn't know exactly what we're dealing with, and that was just to get people from the immediate area, as well as that shelter in place to make sure that we can size things up. But as the mayor mentioned, we started air monitoring immediately. It is ongoing. We're going in all directions within that whole area, and rest assured that nothing at this point has ever shown any type of chemical problems in the air in this entire region. So there's nothing to be concerned of with that. But understand that this is an ongoing scene. So as our people are dealing with this, and because of the structural collapse with that explosion, we don't precisely know yet exactly what types of leaks may happen or may be ongoing. So please just remain calm, remain in the area. Remain out of the area if you're not here already.
Exactly what was dealing with, and the firefighters and the local responders know what's in those buildings, but when you mix those things, that becomes a problem. So we didn't exactly know what we were dealing with. Like Chief O'Neill mentioned, the structural collapse, that puts a whole other component into it, but the accountability of the people that work in the building, that was obviously first and foremost, as well as the residents. The reason that the residents were evacuated very close is because they actually couldn't do a shelter in place because many of their windows were blown out. So the highest amount of precaution was taken. Like the mayor said, we're looking to actually alleviate the shelter in place. We've got a new tool in the toolbox that we're using today. It's a non-sensor gas monitor that's attached to a drone. So we're actually able to get air monitoring samples up in the atmosphere so that we can ultimately make sure that nothing is leaving the site.
Thank you very much. We're now available to try to take any questions that you all have, and then again, we'll continue to get answers throughout the evening.
For those evacuated, what's the time frame that they can
That should be happening within the next couple of hours.
So if they were at work when this happened, should they kind of just stay out of the area for now? A lot of people are worried about their pets if they were out at work during the day and they haven't been able to get back to their homes quite yet. So if they're in their homes, should they just stay there? And if they're not, should they wait?
Exactly. If you're in your home, stay in your home. If you're not home right now, please be patient. We expect that shelter-in-place order to be lifted probably within the next 20 minutes. We just want to make sure we want to exercise as much caution as possible to do some additional air monitoring. Once we're comfortable with that, we'll lift that. But for right now, just stay on pause. And like I mentioned earlier, keep a watch on social media, and we'll put messaging out as quickly as we get it.
In terms of the people transported, can you give us any picture of the severity of the injuries at this point?
Right now, we're not going to comment on any conditions. We've been in touch with local hospital, but we're going to wait to get more information before we provide any information on the individuals.
Because the family has to be notified.
So there was one person that was trapped that our firefighters got out, but there were several people that had to be evacuated. And again, I give a lot of credit to our corporate partners in the city. They had an emergency action plan. They worked with us greatly to get those people out. They were very helpful to make sure that we could try to identify the different solvents and chemicals that they use at this business to help us in any way they could.
I know you can't comment on specific conditions, but can you confirm fatalities, yes or no?
There are no fatalities that we're aware of at this point. We will keep you all up to date if that changes.
And as far as it goes with the chemicals that are potentially in the air, do we have a timeline of when we'll know for sure?
We are working to get a list of that as soon as possible. They might already have it even since we've been here, but we have a lot of folks that are working on that at this time.
Shortly after the explosion, there was concern that went over the scanner about potential ammonia leak. Is that still a concern?
At this point, no, that is not. I mean, whether that was one of the chemicals, but right now, again, as the chief just said, all the air monitoring is clear. We believe it is safe right now, and we're just trying to get a little bit more information before we lift that.
And was it 8 or 11 people that were transported to the hospital? I think you guys said different numbers.
On the way here, we were advised that 3 more individuals were recently transported. It was 8, and on the way, as we were walking to this briefing, we were alerted that 3 other individuals have gone down.
Too early to determine the cause?
That's going to be under investigation for some time.
All right, thank you all very much again. I just want to give a giant thanks to every first responder. from Metro Police, LMPD, Fire Department, EMS, all of the other state and local agencies and first responders that came to this scene, putting their lives on the line to ensure that the individuals who were impacted by this are safe. Really just another show of heroism today here in Louisville. We'll continue to keep you all up to date. We expect to have another briefing, but it will be later tonight in several hours, so stay tuned on that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
In our worst moments as a city, the first responders are at their best.
In case
You're
you
just
all got
listening to a
friends
live
or
update
family that
on an
lives in the
explosion as
area,
Geo Sends
you
color
can
in the
call
Clifton
them
neighborhood, 1901
and
Payne.
all this.
What we learned out of that briefing is
Or
that 11 people,
you can
all
download
of them
the
taken
app
to the
at
hospital. 2 of them had to
WDRB
be rescued.
News,
One of them was
where
trapped,
you
and
can
as
keep
of
up
this
on it.
recording, as of this moment, what we
Subscribe
know
to
right
this
now,
channel, that
no
way
fatalities in
you
that
get
mighty explosion.
notifications
You will see
from
the wreckage
Louisville,
from on the
Kentucky.
left-hand side of your screen.
And it's important to note, too, that the mayor was saying that everyone who worked at that facility and in the surrounding neighborhood, everyone has been accounted for since that explosion. Also of note, the air is monitoring clear, according to the mayor and the Louisville fire chief. They expect that shelter in
Do I
place for that
believe
1
it's
mile
clear?
radius to be lifted
I
in
don't
about
trust
20
the
minutes, so
government.
right
Do you all
before
trust the
5
government?
p.m., but they have this new special tool that they have been using to monitor the air. They send up a drone to test the air and make sure it's clear and good to go. But we've also learned, the mayor was saying that they are working to still hear from the company to see what possible chemicals may have been involved in this explosion. This explosion, the cause still undetermined. The fire chief saying that will take some time in an investigation.
So the concern for people, if you're watching this at home and saying, what was that? What do I do? Stay in your home. And if you are trying to get back there, the shelter in place is going to be lifted pretty soon, here in about 20 minutes, firefighters are saying. So just hang out, stay away until that shelter in place or lockdown of the streets in the area has been lifted. And this is really important because, you know, I've been a reporter at the scene a lot. Our community cares, and folks, they want to go and they want to see for themselves what is going on. Folks, that's just not a good idea. Stay as far away from that place as you can. There's no need for you to be out there and taking pictures, because ultimately it's just going to clog up and get in the way of what you can see on the top right hand side of your screen is a very crowded, congested, still crisis-like atmosphere.
And even though that shelter in place is going to be lifted in 20 minutes, those first responders will still be there for quite some time this evening and into the night. So that's why fire officials are saying, even though the shelter in place will be lifted soon, do not come into that area. Still avoid that area in the Clifton neighborhood. We do have some new video that we want to share with you all from a business right after the explosion happened.
Yeah, step back, son.
You can see how close the business is to Givaudan, and then the windows at the business.
I used to work on things for Avenue back in the 70s at Real Horse Electric Company on Frankfurt Avenue.
To their homes. I think we're going to see a lot of businesses and
There
cars
used to be a
windows
bar
blown.
down
I
the
think we're gonna see a lot
street.
of
I
things
believe
like
it was
this
owned
in the
by
hours and the
Steve
days to come.
Scruggins,
Stefan Johnson was at
who
the
used to
Osaka
race at
restaurant,
the
and,
Sports Dome with
employees there
Leo
telling him
and
that they thought it
Bill
was gunfire
Pack and
at
them.
first because
If you're a
the windows
Sports
just
Dome
shattered
race
and
fan.
they didn't know what it was until now. We now know it's an explosion, but scary moments. You know, you don't know what it is in the moment that it's happening, and there are several restaurants that have had their windows explode with that facility explosion, and we've heard from neighbors in the area too, their roofs caving in because of the strength of that explosion.
Consistent, really, what we've heard from the neighbors that we were able to interview, Richard Essex able to interview at the scene, that, oh, my ring went off on my phone. And if that's not as 2024 as it gets, right? Like, so many people get ring alerts because they want to know if a package has arrived or just that their home is secure, right? It is like a worst case scenario that you check out
The Ring doorbell, people.
You
If
see
you
all of a
can
sudden
afford
the
to
camera
get
go
it, get your
and
Ring
shake,
doorbell.
and then in your neighborhood
camera.
group chats and on your apps and on your next
Protect
doors,
your
and you find out
family
there's been a massive
and the stuff
blast
you get
at
delivered
the
on your
plant
porch.
right down the road. A plant that if
protects
you lived
you.
there in 2003 has exploded before.
Yeah, some bad memories from that plant back in 2003. One person was killed. The western end of that facility exploded. That explosion back then released 26,000 pounds of aqua ammonia. Back in 2003, this is video from that. From this government report, we had learned that the feed tank most likely failed as a result of overheating that caramel color liquid that goes in food, and that generated that excessive pressure leading to that explosion.
And so this is a thick report, and folks, like I said, we're trying to get news as it's developing and read through it at the same time. So I'm reading, during the briefing, I was reading a little bit about this report, and what it revealed is that there were alarms that either were not in place or did not work properly back in 2003. What this,
FEMA, EPA would be a heck of a fine. What do you all think? Will they get fined for this? Since I've been 21 years and it has not been improved. I see lawsuits, people.
21 years later at this same plant with another explosion, and there is going to be a lot of analysis in the coming days about what happened in 2003, were the improvements put in place, and did they work, or how did we get to this same place with another hole in the same building in 2024?
And the title of this report is quite interesting. It's called Catastrophic Vessel Failure. This was from the U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board. But we should note that we do not know the cause of this explosion just yet. The fire chief saying that will take some time during an investigation. We talked about windows being blown out at some of the businesses surrounding
I say it
the
probably be a
neighborhood.
week
We want to
by
go
the time
now
the
to,
EPA
Katrina
and
Nickel,
our
who
government
is at
gets
Quill's
involved.
Coffee, in the area. Katrina?
Well, you guys, like you said, we're at the Quills here on Frankfurt Avenue, and just to show you right now, 2 of the windows have been completely blasted out here at the coffee shop, and as you can see, crews are on scene getting ready to board up these windows and put plywood. We spoke with the owner, and he's the owner of this Quills Coffee as well as the other buildings here. And what's interesting is if you look at the other building, the other windows here, they haven't been shattered. It's just been the 2 here at the Quills Coffee, and as you can see, there are men here getting ready to board up these windows. The man we spoke to, he said he was upstairs in this building, and it felt like a sonic boom, and he just felt the power and the impact of it coming from his chest. Now, he said people were inside the coffee shop as well as some employees. Everybody has been okay, and they've been able to clean up some of the stuff. What's interesting, again, is that a lot of the products and things like that are here on the countertop have been put back in place. So it doesn't look like there's been any too major damage other than just the windows, as well as a light upstairs fell off. So crews are going to be out here kind of picking it up, make sure everything's okay and board it up so they don't have any issues later. And another man who works at the church right across the street here showed us some pictures earlier and said that some of the stained glass of this church has actually been blown out. Now, we can't see it from where we're located at this moment, but he said the church is over 100 years old, and now some of the stained glass has been torn apart. So we also know that at some of the other Quills locations, as you know, there's multiple locations here in Louisville. The one in New Lou felt it and lost power, and people at the Baxter location also kind of felt the power of this boom. So this was a very widespread situation that a lot of people across our city are aware of what's happening. So we'll be here. We'll keep you guys posted if anything else comes up and we hear from more people about what that moment was exactly like. Live on Frankfurt Avenue with photojournalist Greg Schapker. Katrina Nickel, WDRB News.
Katrina, thank you. Now we saw some of the cleanup already underway about an hour and 45 minutes after this explosion at the Givaudan plant in the Clifton neighborhood. And if you're
people, I say there be lawsuits. The business had their windows blown out, lost a business. I know they got insurance for the windows, but that company's going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for damage and loss of business.
1 mile shelter in place for the area from 1901 Payne Street. This is the address in the Clifton neighborhood where the blast occurred. I'm just told right now that the shelter in place has been lifted. And so if you are watching this on an app and you are saying, okay, I live here, I'm seeing pictures of the damages to businesses nearby, well, you now have the permission to go back and see what has happened to your home.
And a lot of people, they were worried, wanting to get back into their homes. They're worried about their pets, worried that the windows were shattered. Maybe some of their pets could get out. They want to go get home, make sure their house is okay, their animals at home are okay. But interesting to note, I found Jody Myman with EMA, he was saying that they have this new tool, this drone that goes up in the air to collect air samples.
I like to see that
it
new
has been
tool.
monitoring clear for some time, and that's why the shelter in place was
Would
lifted.
you all like to see it?
This may be a little bit
Maybe they
will
let us know, or somebody in the field will put it up on YouTube. Let us see what it looks like.
To meet the all clear here is a higher level than what the federal EPA would require. So interesting that they're using this new technology and that it is said, all right, it's the
say prayers for the people in that area. God wants you to say prayers for those
this blast happened
families.
around 3 o'clock. Our newsroom is intensely, every member of our news staff working to gather information on this right now. I'm told that we have some 911 calls that came in right after the explosion. Let's listen.
Battalion 2, we got a report from plant personnel. Unknown persons are still missing. Unknown what the substance is blowing out. Engine 4. He said there was approximately 60 individuals working at the time. They evacuated prior to the explosion, but it's unknown how many people are still unaccounted for.
You can hear the urgency in the voice there, and that's kind of how we felt in the newsroom when we were learning.
Let's say prayers for the ones
downstairs who were
that got hurt. It's in the
people who
hospital
lived in the
and
Clifton
those families.
neighborhood, their homes themselves. Just that urgency and hearing that explosion that rocked the area, hearing windows were smashed out or broken and shattered.
There were calls coming.
Losing power. Yeah. Everyone you think knew someone or knew someone who knew someone who lived in that area. A lot of people in Louisville feeling the impact of this.
We had somebody in the Highlands say that they felt it. That's about 2 miles away, if you know the lay of the land out there. We had somebody in the
look at the house behind the building.
Who said that they felt
it looked like it's a 2-story house.
Blast had calls coming from all across the city. People saying, "Did you feel it? What was that?" And so, really, an urgent situation. We just played those 911 calls, and in case you weren't here for the briefing from the city earlier, we know that 11 people were taken to the hospital from this explosion, that 2 of them had to be rescued, that 1 person was pinned. Again, all employees at the plant, because it was normal operations. I made a note here, normal activity when the explosion occurred. And so normal activity at the Givaudan plant is to basically make coloring that goes into various types of foods and drinks.
And I remember the first live shot from Richard Essex when he was on scene. He spoke to someone who was in the plant doing hearing tests for people who said he was just too shaken to do an interview. And you just imagine hearing that explosion, being right there when it happened. You know, people heard it from miles away and felt it miles away, but to be in that facility when it happened, you can't even imagine, because if you look at the aftermath, the top left corner of your screen, that is what happened after this explosion, a giant gaping hole in that facility.
And that is really a telling picture. We do want to clarify here that while the shelter in place has been lifted, there is still an evac order in place right up against the plant for the 2 blocks that are immediately around it. So shelter in place has been lifted, but there's still an evacuation order for the 2 blocks around the plant. So we talked about people wanting to get back and to see their homes and to see their pets. A lot of people will be able to do that, but But those, if you live closest to the plant, still got to stay away for just a little bit longer. That's the latest information that we have.
And just stay away in general, too, if that's not your neighborhood,
Right.
Because this investigation and the cleanup, it is going to take a long time.
People.
Those first responders, you see them on the top of your screen right there, they are going to be there for quite some time, a long day for them indeed.
Probably
And a long
until
night,
after
because we don't
9
know
o'clock
how long the
tonight,
plant
I
will
would
be-
say.
have to be on scene monitoring
My
the
past
situation.
experience.
So this story kind of happens in stages. There's the what happened right now, like the blast. Okay, get the injured to where they need to be. Then there's the cleanup, not only at that site, but the surrounding businesses, the surrounding homes. And then that next step is going to be, how did this happen? And that's the long process, because these investigations, the U.S. Chemical Safety Board, they're likely going to be involved. OSHA will likely be involved with its own investigation, and those types of cases can take months, sometimes
I
even
forgot
years
about
to
OSHA.
reach a conclusion.
And this is almost a bad nightmare for a lot of people who live in that area, because not only did it happen back in 2003, but again, here we have another explosion at that plant here in
21
2024.
years
One
later,
person
people.
was killed in that explosion back in 2003. At this point, there are no fatalities of those 11 people who have been taken to the hospital, according to the mayor.
And I am told that we just talked to someone who lived through this explosion in 2003.
Can't believe that this distance. I mean, I thought somebody literally drove through the living room of my house.
Yeah.
It was insane. Yeah. Well, I hope everybody's okay.
So, again, for the people who are mainstays in that neighborhood, you've been around for a long time, you're like,
How does this happen again?
like, how does this happen again? And
That's a
what
good
folks earlier
question,
said, that they were
people.
concerned- they were- had
How
concerns
did it
like
happen
Supreme
again,
High, you know,
21
whether you
years
were,
later?
In Rubbertown,
If anybody's
or, you know,
out
like,
there knows
wherever
stuff
you
like
are in
that,
the city,
put it in
if
the
you talk to people who
comments
live in neighborhoods in the
where I
shadows
can
of
check
these
it out
industrial plants,
later,
it
because
is
I'm not that
consistently
smart.
we hear a concern
I'm not
that
into
accidents or
the
something
field.
bad can happen.
I'm over
For
23
neighbors in the
miles
Clifton
away
community, in the
from
Clifton
it.
community,
Did I
that
hear a
concern,
boom?
That fear has happened again.
And Givaudan, that plant there, in case you're just now joining us, it adds color
I
to
should
food.
heard
It is
it,
a food
but
additive
I'm
plant.
20-some miles
we
away.
heard from some of the people who were in the area that they had the caramel coloring on their clothing. That's specifically what that plant does there, adding the caramel coloring to a lot of the beverages that we drink. So that's a little insight into what that plant does there.
And there's been a name change recently, because in 2023,
2003.
2003 there was an explosion, but in 2023 there was a transition. Most people may know this place not as Givaudan, but the D.D. Williamson and Company, because that's what it was called back in 2003 when it exploded. That's what it had been called for many years. So the operation didn't really change. I mean, they're still in the food coloring business, but it's now known as Givaudan. It's part of a global company that does this. There are
See a
facilities
map
all
on
over the
the
world, from
left
Iceland to
top
Brazil to
corner,
China.
Yeah, so this
1901
explosion
Payne Street.
happened around 3 p.m. in the Clifton neighborhood, and we've already started to see some of that cleanup happen. Some of the restaurants, they're already putting boards up where those windows were shattered from the explosion. That was at Quill's Coffee Shop. Osaka also cleaning up. People can now go back into their homes to see the damage there, to start their cleanup process in their own homes. We've heard from one person whose ceiling just came through. It's not just that one facility that is impacted. The impact from this explosion is far and wide in the city.
And it's just not lost on me that if you have lived in the surrounding neighborhood in the shadow of this plant for so long, that you remember that it has happened before. And so I'm told that we have talked to another woman, another person who was very concerned that there would be another blast.
Have you ever seen anything like that?
About 20 years ago, it blew up again. The guy was killed.
And that makes you think, if that happens again, this is now the second time, is it time to move?
Well, there's a harder look probably the second time about, and that's why I said there is a playbook from safety regulators about what went wrong in 2003. There was a instruction guide, for lack of a better term, given back to what can you do to shore up your operation processes and training that failed in 2003 and allowed for the first blast to happen. And so there's going to be a
maybe concrete walls. What do y'all think about concrete walls? Does that help out better?
And were the correct steps taken? Were they put in processes? Were the processes put in place? Did the company fail in the same ways? And if it did, will it still be licensed to operate? I mean, all of those questions.
If they didn't correct any of that in the last 21 years,
the weeks and the months and
I say they'd be going out of business.
Two videos here, your left screen and your right screen. The left screen is what has happened today. The screen on your right is what happened in 2003. There are eerie similarities between these two videos.
The train is the one that is the most,
the
right?
Train.
That a train on the track in the 2003 video you can see took the brunt of the blast.
That shows how strong that blast was.
And then on the left-hand side of your screen, we have a still picture, and it shows that the train, it's a clear picture that shows that a train derailed with the might of the explosion. We also have the shelter in places that happened. 1,500 people had to shelter in place during the blast in 2003. There was a shelter in place for a 1 mile radius.
And we also learned back in 2003, because of that, there was a $7,500 fine for air pollution control emission because of that blast in 2003.
$7,500 is too cheap.
At this explosion,
it should have been $20,000 or higher. What do you all think about that?
Gosh, if it happens again, you're just out of words.
How did we get here? Yeah, that's the question. And that's what the investigation will not just be.
That's when OSHA and EPA
here again.
Justice. So that the air was monitoring clear for most of this afternoon.
Because this was a hazmat. This came out as a hazmat.
There was a lot of concern that you'd be breathing something in that air that was not good for you. But good news here.
25 miles north of
Louisville. As people try to get out of that area, there have been some traffic problems on the roadway. So we want to get right over to Mike Marshall to give us the details on that. Mike?
Fallon Gilbert, as we're heading out this afternoon, we've had some problems definitely through downtown. Let me show you one situation right now. This is 64 eastbound, give or take right around the soccer stadium, and you can see what's ongoing there. Car here, we have another one over the side of the building on the side there. A couple of police cars blocking a lane here. So as you're coming through downtown right now, extremely heavy traffic. Here's our wreck. And it wasn't quite in the area of Clifton, but very close. People just trying to get out of downtown. And that traffic is backed up solid all the way back over to 9th Street. Now, what I can tell you, both directions as you're coming out between Melwood traffic.
All right, thank you, Mike. And our Hayden Rostevsky, she has been able to get closer to the scene and give us an idea of what she is seeing. Hayden, where are you? And tell us what you're seeing.
Hey guys, I'm out here on Frankfurt Avenue to give you kind of a locator. I'm just across the street, kind of catty-corner. So
Windhorse Electric
people
Company.
are heeding the warning from officials to stay out of the area, but over my shoulder, you can actually see that facility and the site of that explosion this afternoon. I can see that there is either steam or water or some kind of smoke. I think it's probably, you can probably hear people dumping glass into a dumpster right now. And that is because the businesses here in this plaza have sustained some pretty significant damage. This is the plaza on the corner with the Clifton Liquor Shop and Beckman Fitness. I can see that people are inside surveying the damage.
That might be down from Windhorse
Electric Company. There might be even more
Company.
damage inside. They just filled an entire large trash can and dumped it into this yellow dumpster here in front of their building. But as you can see, there is just a mangled amount of metal there. at that plant. You can see from this shot just how strong this explosion was and how severe the damage is. We heard from emergency officials not too long ago saying that 11 people had been transported to the hospital, all employees. I could not get city leaders to tell us the severity of those injured at this point. We do know that neighbors were asked to leave their homes as they monitored for any chemicals. They are going to be allowed back in. We've seen a lot of neighbors kind of coming home, wondering what to get back to this area and go inside their homes. It was heard and felt pretty far away. We will continue to stay here in this area and keep you updated of any new information. When I was speaking with emergency officials just a few moments ago, they told us that they do expect to give us another briefing, but not for several hours. We won't get that until later on tonight. Reporting live in the Clifton neighborhood, Hayden Rostevsky, WDRB News.
Hayden, thank you. Hayden giving us our closest picture that we've seen yet of the might of the explosion at the Givaudan food coloring processing or food coloring plant in the Clifton neighborhood. This happened just after 3 o'clock this afternoon, and immediately it came out as a hazmat situation because if you have a plant, a food processing plant that does food coloring, we know that there's chemicals involved there. We know that there's immediately fire crews don't know what they're getting into.
They want to keep the people safe.
Exactly. So there was a shelter in place that has since been lifted for a 1 mile area, but there is still an evacuation order for the 2 blocks around the plant. Let's listen in to what the fire chief told us earlier.
Nothing at this point has turned up with that, but understand that this is an ongoing scene. So as our people are dealing with this, and because of the structural collapse with that explosion.
Anyway.
So that was the fire chief speaking, talking about the air quality testing clear, which is fantastic news after something so devastating that we see on the top of our screen right there. I think it's important to note that when we saw the video behind Hayden and her live shot, that was a new perspective, the closest perspective.
People, if you want to see more about this, go to WDRB News in Louisville, Kentucky. Also, Indiana happened Friday. 2 kids went to the hospital from the grandma, Robert Cartwright. You go to WDRB News and look and scroll down until you see 2 kids were sent to the hospital. This happened Friday. And you see the interview they done with my brother. But Lexington, Indiana is a nice town.
And covering this since we've learned of this explosion at 3 p.m. Let's start with our Christy Batista, who is outside University Hospital. Christy?
Fallon Gill, of the 11 patients that were taken to area hospitals, 6 of them are here at U of L. As soon as we pulled up, those doors right at the hospital were open. There was medical staff with hazmat suits on. There are 2 ambulances here. Currently, I am told that the decontamination protocols are in place, which means every situation is different. It really depends on the chemicals that are involved, what patients were exposed to, whether it was inhaled or on their skin. But the medical teams here are working closely with any information that they have, working closely with EMS and Louisville firefighters to determine exactly what chemical concoctions those patients may be facing for the best treatment. We are told from the mayor and from Louisville firefighters that employees that were hurt were all the employees that were working in the plant. Everything was normal, we were told, when the explosion happened. We did hear that at this point in time, all of these patients are living. No one has been killed from this explosion, but they do want to wait until they get more, hopefully to learn more in just a few minutes.
Steve Batista outside University of Louisville Hospital will continue plant on Payne Street in the Clifton neighborhood. Richard?
Well, we are told we are 2 blocks away from the plant because the police and the fire department won't let us go any further. But the people that we were talking to earlier, the people that live just down the street, most of them have been allowed to go back to their house. First, they told then they can go down, check your house, but come back, but none of them have come back. So most of those people, or everybody that's been coming up this way that lives here, the police have been letting them through. And we have seen really kind of like traffic is starting to come back to normal around here. For a while, you didn't see any cars through here, but now we almost have a traffic jam. But we'll take a look down the street. You can still see there is that are lining this part of the road. In these neighborhoods, the people along this stretch and on this side, and then there's a couple houses up behind the plant, they've been allowed to go back there, and they haven't stayed. Now, Ken and I have both been able to taste and smell kind of a heavy ammonia smell. It's not all
who live in that area impacted by this explosion. Thank you for your reporting this evening. Now let's go to Katrina Nickel, who is outside Quill's Coffee, and you see the plywood up already. Katrina?
Well, you guys, we are just 0.2 miles away from where Richard is standing. We are at Frankfort Avenue and Bel Air Avenue in front of the Quill's Coffee. And as you can see, windows have been boarded up. When we got here about a half hour, 45 minutes ago, these boards were not untouched. Now, before this plywood was up, when we were looking into Quill's, everything had been put back together in place. The man who owns this building, as well as Quill's Coffee, had told us that employees and they didn't know what happened. Now, I know Richard has been talking about how things appear to have turned back to normal. There's traffic again. We're seeing a lot of neighbors starting to come out of their homes for the first time and really take in the scene of what building has had stained glass windows blown out. Very minor, just looks like little holes, and some of them have even buckled. So it's been really interesting to kind of see the aftermath of all this damage. We've also been seeing a lot of first responders starting to leave the scene, head back to wherever they had come from, and get back to daily operations. And we've also seen a lot of LG&E crews come into the area because a lot of people in this area initially lost power, but we know crews are working to restore power back. And just to talk about how widespread this entire explosion was felt across the city, the man who owns Quill's has several locations, and he said that the Nulu location actually lost power, as well as people on the Baxter location people at the Baxter location also felt the back to normal. People traveling down Frankfort Avenue before things had been quiet for quite some time. Live on
Boy, it's changed since the 1970s.
WDRB News.
Katrina Nickel, on the extent of the damage and
that impact is being felt several blocks away behind me. We're about a block or so from where the explosion happened. We're on New Main Street in the Clifton neighborhood, and for the last hour or two, this area has been sheltered in place, but meanwhile, we're impacted by this blast.
My son and I had just parked on the side of Osaka and locked the car when we felt and heard this. It was very, very loud, and you could hear things shattering.
It sounds like crazy, like big. Everybody went out, but suddenly we find out the glasses fell down.
Directly down the railway, we're about 0.3 miles.
And how did you realize that something had happened?
So our Ring camera footage actually alerted us. So we got like a loud boom notification, and then some of the community boards started to pick up comments, and we knew pretty quickly something had happened.
Well, that last person was Samantha Kerr. She said once she got that Ring camera notification, she came racing home, but luckily there was no damage to her house. But again, emergency crews everywhere. To give you some perspective of where we are in the Clifton neighborhood, we're again on New Main Street, and right down there at the corner is Payne Street. And again, the plant is just a block or two behind me. And again, as you can see, police have this area blocked off. We will stay here throughout the evening and keep you up to date on whatever we find in here. I also want to mention, I talked to some guys at a wood shop just a few feet ahead of us, and they said it was a big bang inside, and there was dust everywhere, but no damage. Not a significant amount of damage to their businesses or homes. However, the Osaka place you saw and the coffee shop that Katrina went to, both of them.
All right, Stefan, thank you. And really hit or miss when it comes to neighbors or businesses in that area.
Right next door, isn't that what Katrina showed us? Like no windows at Quill's, and right next door, that business you'd never know there had been an explosion down the road.
WDRB's Hayden Ristevsky, she is right behind the facility, the Givaudan facility, where we can really get that up-close look of some of that damage. Hayden?
Guys, yeah, I'm along Frankfurt Avenue, and this is about as close as we've been able to get. So I'll step out of the way so you can take a look at the damage that we can see from this vantage point. Again, I'm on Frankfurt Avenue, so I'm a little bit higher up, looking down toward the back of that facility. I'm right near the Kentucky School for the Blind, and we just heard from several reporters showing damage all around this area. There is still some kind of smoke or mist of some kind coming off of the facility where there has been flames of this magnitude. And what it's doing is monitoring chemicals in the atmosphere. And at this point, we have not received any other type of update indicating that there was or is any dangerous chemical in the air right now. Of course, if that changes, we'll let you know. But that is why emergency officials have allowed people to come back in. On top of people cleaning up damage, we also know that about 450 LG&E customers were without power this afternoon as a result of this blast. We can actually see photojournalist Emily Evans turning the camera around. There is a large LG&E truck there at the inner, a few outstanding at this time. Sometimes power needs to be shut off close to situations like this as a safety concern because you don't want anything to get worse. We will stay here in this area and continue to monitor this very quickly developing breaking news story. But for now, reporting live, Hayden Rostevsky, WDRB News. Back to you guys.
Hayden, thank you for reporting and that live picture as well. Now we want to turn into the dig of this story this afternoon, the blast, the explosion at the Givaudan food coloring plant. And many people who live in that neighborhood are saying, how could this happen again? Let's bring in WDRB.com reporter and investigator Marcus Green. Now, Marcus, in April of 2003, it was a case of deja vu. 21 years ago, there was another blast at this same plant.
That's right. Many people, and I think a lot of us, when we first began to hear of this action today, thought this is reminiscent of 2003, and that's when an explosion, as you mentioned, Gil, at the same site killed one worker, heard in a plant does. And further, federal investigators found that that company at the time, D.D. Williamson, did not have basic standards in place to determine if the equipment was sound, and they were faulted for failing to properly train workers about the risks of using that equipment.
So what came out of that was a series of recommendations, basically fixes, and that's common when you see these catastrophic failures.
One of the ones that occurred was the state labor cabinet, which is essentially which oversees, understands what it has to do, how it needs to be safe. And what we've seen since then, as far as we can look back, there haven't been any major incidents, investigations, or even complaints at the then D.D. Williamson, now Givaudan factory in recent years. Now, there was, in 2023, 2 instances.
People, I'm going to go get my tripod.
Pollution Control District.
I'm going to lay my phone down, but the audio, you still hear, so I got to go in the kitchen to get my tripod. So I'll be back. And go to WDRB News.
Let's make it so the folks at home can understand what's going on here.
A very strict program in place to ensure that federal standards are not compromised, and so it's not unique to see companies from all stripes be cited and fined. And in this case of Givaudan, they had been faced with allegations. They decided to settle those without admitting fault. So these were claims.
Common. We should say that is common.
In other words, they got out ahead and said, we're going to go ahead and pay a fine. We're not admitting to these. These are allegations. But it at least shed some light on how this plant has been operated, that there were instances that got into the crosshairs of city regulators in recent years.
Okay, so typically the city's going to come with a pretty complete report, right? And so these emissions or excess emissions, there's a threshold of what you can release. And so if they've been as the city alleges, in violations of the excess emissions, the company's going to come back and, settle this under what's called an agreed order. Basically a contract that says, we're not admitting guilt, but we're going to pay for it now.
Correct. And these were agreed orders, as you mentioned, but it is important to note that one of the things that the city found was that they weren't submitting basic compliance reports. So these are fundamental documents that are supposed to show how a company is operating, and that's one of the areas that Givaudan did not comply with in the most recent agreed order from 2023.
Okay, can you walk us through it? I'm sorry. Are you going to talk about the name change?
So I have a question. Before we move on to your question, Gil, going back to the explosion of 2003, there were issues at the plant that caused this explosion. So how long would safety and compliance checks be going on at that facility? And would there be more because of what happened there?
I mean, typically it depends on the industry. It depends on what kind of workplace safety protocols are in place. I know with a lot of industries, you will get routine inspections, routine compliance, walkthroughs and things of that nature. So I know that the 2003 explosion and that 2003 catastrophic incident did trigger a whole host of recommendations, but in the years from there until the present day, it's really hard, at least as we found in just the last couple of hours, to really paint a very thorough picture of what kind of safety regimen was in place at this plant.
Mm-hmm. And especially because you were talking about the name change.
Sure. Kind of walk us through that, because we heard some interviews from neighbors earlier today with our live reporters who called it D.D. Williams, and that was what it was known as until 2023, correct?
Until 2021. So D.D. Williamson operated at that site for a long time, and in 2021, a Swiss-based conglomerate called Givaudan, which makes fragrances and food colorings, really the business that D.D. Williamson was in, the food coloring business here in Louisville. Givaudan purchased the Louisville assets and moved its coloring operations essentially to Louisville. And so the work that's been going on in Clifton at the former D.D. Williamson plant is basically what was being done in prior years. It just was being done under a new owner and a new entity that was operating it. So, Givaudan, a very multinational company, expanded its reach and took on this Louisville property, but from what I can tell, was pretty much doing the same thing.
The same reason for the explosion that caused the 2003 explosion is the same that caused today's explosion. Would there be stiffer penalties, even though it is under a name change, or how would that work?
I think it's just too early to know, because really what's going to come down to this investigation is determining what were the factors that contributed. If they were similar to what had happened in the past, and there were things that are found in this current investigation that may be in the same ballpark as what happened in 2003, I can envision a scenario in which inspectors and investigators would be at least more mindful of what kinds of fines or citations are going to come out of this. But I just think at this current moment, we're looking at whether or not the mistakes of the past and the faults of the past were repeated today.
Yeah, we've all been up here doing this in this city for a very long time. What does history tell us about what comes next?
What's going to come next is a very long investigative process. In the case of the 2003 explosion, it was well into 2004 when the Federal Regulatory Board began to issue final reports, hold neighborhood meetings. So as rough and uncomfortable and sad and horrific a day it's been for the neighborhood, we have a lot more weeks and months ahead where there will be investigations and investigators on site. We're really in the very beginning stages of trying to understand what happened and what the impacts are.
All right, thank you, Marcus Green. We have been on the air now wall to wall for 2.5 hours. We are going to press pause right now, but we are still on top of the big story of the day, a mass explosion, a big blast at a food coloring plant in Louisville. More to come after this. WDRD News.
People, I want to thank you all that's sitting in the background. You might know people that lives close to there. And I guess you could say God told me to bring it to you in case it was close to them. That's why I'm sharing it, in case you all have family. And so I wanted the thumbs up. Share it with you friends that you might have, That's why I've done it. It's news that you all need to watch. So that's to bring you the news. I know you all don't care about Louisville, Kentucky. But this can happen in your city, anywhere on the planet. Now stop it, Margaret. So that's what you know somebody that may. So this is why I'm sharing it, in case you might know somebody, I just want to let you all know about it. So I got it running on my cell phone battery. If I can find my cabinet, that's the problem. I have to find it. I'm trying to get a hold of it.
And so we weren't people that have been hanging around this bridge in this area, people that have been on the TARC bus, they've all been allowed back through this area and into their houses. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Richard reporting from Payne Street this evening. Thank you so much. And it's important to note that we could still see a lot of police, first responder vehicles, their lights flashing. There are still a lot of them on scene, and first responders are saying to please stay away from that area, especially if you do not live there.
It's interesting, as the sun starts to go down, the police flashing lights, the emergency flashing lights are kind of lighting what is a darkening sky, and you can see that on the left-hand side of your screen, just beyond the haze that is still emanating from the fire scene.
I know. I mean, and you look at that video, and you don't want to get that image, have the meaning of that image lost on you, because you see that giant gaping hole in the middle of that facility. We had learned that 2 people had to be rescued, 1 person trapped because of that explosion there. We want to give you a different perspective of some of that damage from this explosion. So we are going to go to WDRB's Hayden Rostevsky now. Hayden?
Hi guys, I'm out here on Frankfurt Avenue, and yes, you mentioned that the sun is starting to set, so we wanted to give you what could be one of your final looks at the damage from this position. You can see that this explosion just mangled metal at this plant this afternoon. This is as close as we've been able to get in person. We're probably about Haldeman Avenue, right outside the Kentucky. A lot of neighbors in the area, they're coming home, they're speaking with each other. I have seen easily 30 or 40 people walking their dogs. It appears that everyone is starting to be able to come back into this area, check on their pets, check on their neighbors, and start to figure out where to go from here. We have seen many people boarding up their windows that were blown out, cleaning up glass, throwing it in dumpsters, but we want to touch on the fact that emergency management officials told us that they did not detect any dangerous chemicals or dangerous levels of chemicals as of yet. However, since moving to this position, photojournalist Emily Evans and I have noticed that there is a smell in the air. It's making our noses tingle. I can kind of feel almost a little bit of it on my tongue. I think that's what people have been saying when they can say they can taste it. Almost like my cheeks are a little flush. And that's happened pretty quickly since we've been here. I wouldn't say that it's a strong odor. or a pungent odor at that. It's kind of wafting. But when I was over at that media staging earlier, kind of in the different direction away from the facility and in a different direction of the wind, I couldn't smell or taste anything. But as I mentioned, it's very faint, but it's here. So we don't have information for you. All we have at this have been able to release to us, and right now they say that there is no significant danger from chemicals. However, it's clear that there is something in the air here, and we will continue to stay on top of it for you, push for answers, not expecting another briefing for some time, but we do expect to get another one from city officials tonight. I'll leave you live from Frankfurt Avenue. Hayden Rostevsky, WDRB News.
All right, and thank you, Hayden, for telling us not only what you are experiencing and also seeing. So you have both Hayden and Richard describing something in the air. Again, what we have confirmed, the latest city response is this. I think we're going to go to Jody Myman, Emergency Management, who told us earlier that all air monitoring control readings.
The air was testing clear. Let's listen in right now to what he had to say earlier.
We've got a new tool in the toolbox that we're using today. It's a 9-sensor gas monitor that's attached to a drone, so we're actually able to get air monitoring samples up in the atmosphere so that we can ultimately make sure that nothing is leaving the site.
So we heard from Jody Myman right there saying that the air that they were monitoring was coming back clear,
and then they lifted shortly thereafter the shelter in place. Now we do know that there is another briefing that's supposed to happen later tonight. We will press with more questions based on what our reporters are experiencing at the scene and bring you those answers when we have them. For right now, we're going to press pause. Breaking news coverage continues after this.
Black Friday sales event. Right now during the Black Friday sales event, new 2025 Kia K4s are $159 per month. Plus, we want your trade, even if you owe $6,000, $8,000, even $10,000 more than it's worth. Only at the Kia stores.
At Spectrum, we believe every day unlocks unlimited possibilities to bring you closer to the people and places you love. Spectrum transforms your gaming experience into a galaxy of adventures. And with the fastest, most reliable internet, you're always front row to the entertainment you love, no matter where you are. Get Spectrum Internet Advantage for $20 per month plus a 3-year price guarantee. Call 1-833-294-0246. Spectrum Internet gives you the power to stream all the shows, movies, and sports you love.
I was just a small crack in your wall, but now your foundation is really settling in. Uneven floors, cracks in brick, and sticking doors and windows are just some of the signs I've made myself at home. I can do this all day.
Frustrated by your foundation? United Dynamics uses customized peering solutions to stabilize your home's foundation, giving you peace of mind. Contact United Dynamics today for your no-hassle free evaluation.
Could that be allergies? Or is it a sinus infection? Or maybe something else? Many people misdiagnose themselves. Advanced ENT and Allergy can pinpoint a treatment plan for you. Stay ahead of the curve and find relief around the corner at one of our 6 locations. Our specialized medical experts provide ear, nose, and throat care for the whole family. Schedule your appointment online today at advancedentandallergy.com.
Karen's about to retire. Here's what's going into her retirement.
There's us. She raised us on our own.
10 years as my roller derby wife.
Great. Preschool, she's open.
She's a mother.
I think we turned out all right.
She's a friend. Our mothers can tell stories. She's a teacher.
She may be retiring, but she's not done.
I'm never gonna stop.
Retirement is the sum of your life's work. Now what? Get income for life and protect your life's work with Prudential.
Life Center Louisville is back with more displays and better than ever. LifeCenterLouisville.com.
Right now during the Black Friday sales event, get up to $6,000 off MSRP on select new 2024 Kia Sorento SUVs. Or 0% financing on new 2024 Kia Sorentos EV6 and EV9. Don't miss the Black Friday sales event only at the Kia stores.
And we continue to follow breaking news all afternoon and evening. And here in this video, this live picture of an explosion. An explosion happened at this plant in the Clifton neighborhood. The sun is now setting. It has been a long day for first responders in Louisville. 11 employees transported to the hospital because of that explosion. And as far as we know at this point, there are no fatalities.
At Givaudan Sense Color plant, a food coloring facility. Let's get over to Rick DeLuca now with a look at our forecast.
WDRB weather is sponsored by the Window Source of Kentucky.
As far as temperatures go, this was your typical fall day. 59 is our average, and we were right on the money. That's exactly where we ended up this afternoon. A day filled with sunshine, but more clouds to our west. Those will begin streaming in as the night wears on. And there's this area of rainfall from New Orleans into Panama City, and that will actually enhance the rainfall that is expected late tomorrow into Thursday as it collects out ahead of this area of low pressure, which means midweek you will want the rain gear. In fact, the Thursday morning drive doesn't look all that fun with ponding on the roadways, maybe even some flooding issues in those low-lying areas. Outside right now, you have nothing to worry about weather-wise. 57 your temperature, east to northeast wind at 13 with a dew point, which is around 37. Temperatures hanging out in the 50s around the metro. 54 in St. Matthews, 56 New Albany, Sellersburg 52, and E-Town also hanging out in the low 50s as well. Now tonight will get colder. Temperatures in the 30s for everyone across the board. However, with more clouds showing up and skies turning partly cloudy, we don't have to worry about frost. By 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, warm front whips in with some scattered showers, but that radar really fills in around 6, and then by 8, we have widespread rain, some of that heavy at times at 10 o'clock, a quick break before another batch of rain moves in around 3 o'clock in the morning. That will end by around 5, which means Thursday morning we have scattered showers across the board. Even some bursts of rain, ponding on the roadways will be a guarantee. And we keep the clouds and showers going right on through the late morning and into the early afternoon. Rain should end around 1 to 2 o'clock, but the clouds do not exit. And it's going to hold highs into the 50s for the balance of the day. On Friday, it looked like yesterday would kick the clouds out by the afternoon. That's not the case. Clouds will hang around all day long. From those clouds, maybe a stray sprinkle. Otherwise, it is mainly dry with Friday, with warmer temperatures and sunshine returning for the weekend. High clouds tonight. Skies turn partly cloudy, but it will be cold. Low down to 39 here in the city. Tomorrow, 58. Some sunshine early, and then rain moves in late. Maybe 1 or 2 rumbles of thunder, but that would be about it. That rain could be heavy at times Wednesday night, and then showers linger into Thursday. Mainly dry Friday. At least the weekend looks nice. 65 on Saturday, close to 70 by Sunday.
All right, Rick, thank you. So we know 11 of the employees from the Givaudan plant were taken to the hospital, but 7 of them were being treated at University Hospital. That's where we find our Christy Batista. Christy, what can you tell us?
Well, we are waiting to hear from Dr. Jason Smith any minute now to give us an update on the conditions of those patients that are here. We were told earlier that they didn't want to give us any more information until they had the information on how these patients are doing. But we do know that there were no fatalities with this huge blast. I want to give you an idea of what we saw as soon as we pulled up to U of L Hospital here. It is certainly an all-hands-on-deck situation here as well, a team effort here at the hospital as well. Off camera, you have LMPD officers that are blocking the road so that only medical staff can get by. If you can see up close, closer to this building, there are firefighters on scene here, and those firefighters, along with paramedics, are working with hospital staff to tell them about the decontamination process that they have to go through. We saw hospital staff members opening those double doors that you see there, and they were in hazmat suits. But every situation, we're told, is different. It depends on the chemicals that were involved, what patients were exposed to, whether it was inhaled or on their skin. The medical teams here, again, are working closely with the information that they have, working closely with EMS and Louisville firefighters to determine exactly what chemical concoctions these patients may be facing to best care for them. And again, we are expected to hear from Dr. Jason Smith in the next few minutes, and we will bring you that information live.
Christy Batista, thank you for your reporting. We are continuing to follow this breaking news. Big news day in Louisville, a big explosion at the Givaudan food coloring plant in the Clifton neighborhood. More after this timeout.
For 60 years, we've been providing customers with top-notch tires, quality service, and the best nationwide warranties. Big L is the team you trust.
The holidays. And holiday trips. And holiday toys. And holiday bonding. And it all comes together in a Chevrolet.
Find your red tag. Get 1.9% financing on all 2024 Silverado 1500 pickups. Plus, get $3,750 total value on this Silverado when you trade in an eligible vehicle. Kentucky drives Chevy.
I'm attorney Jim Desmond, and my law firm only handles car accident cases. I want to define for you the Desmond difference. The difference is, with me, you will receive immediate legal advice. Every call to the firm is answered by me. Experience the Desmond difference today.
Don't be left out in the cold this winter. Call today and guarantee home comfort with a $79 furnace tune-up and safety inspection from A+ Stir, ensuring your system is running smoothly. It's another reason why A+ Stir is your call for comfort.
This is Kathy. She's about to see her dentist. She's afraid. Not because of the drill, but because of the bill. A big bill. But Kathy doesn't need to be afraid, and neither do you. Thanks to affordable dental insurance from Physicians Mutual Insurance Company. It's easy to get this coverage. Don't believe me? Call or go online for all the details. You can even have this free information kit. This isn't a discount plan or preventive-only coverage. This is real dental insurance. It helps pay for over 400 procedures. That's a lot. I'm talking cleanings, fillings, crowns, bridges, root canals, even dentures. Bottom line, you'll have help paying for routine care and expensive major work. But if you want deductibles, forget it. There aren't any. No annual maximum either. Plus, you can see any dentist you want. Stop fearing the big bill. Start saving at the dentist. Call now or go to sendinfokit.com.
Physicians Mutual, Physicians Mutual.
What?
For 60 years, we've been providing customers with top-notch tires, quality service, and the best nationwide warranties. Big L is the team you trust.
Welcome back to WDRB News at 5. This is a live picture from our drone camera of the massive explosion at the Givaudan food coloring plant in the Clifton neighborhood. As the sun sets, it actually kind of gives us a better picture of just how mighty that blast was. 11 workers from this facility were taken to the hospital, and the head of the emergency room for U of L, Dr. Jason Smith.
Let's listen to him right now.
University Hospital received 7 casualties from the blast area today. Currently, 2 of those are in critical condition. The other 5 are in stable condition, currently being evaluated for their injuries. I want to thank our fire department who helped with decontamination of the individuals. And I want to thank our staff who did an outstanding job with decontamination and managing this. Obviously, an explosion like this in this area is always a difficult problem to manage. But luckily, we've been able to take care of all the patients that we received and continue operations here at University Hospital.
With a blast this large, this could have been a much different situation, no doubt.
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest problem with blast injuries is it really is a little bit of everything. It can be burns, it can be blunt injuries, it can be penetrating injuries, trapped by debris, chemical explosions, and chemical exposures. So from that perspective, it's great to have a team like this that can manage these patients.
Can you tell us the extent of some of those injuries?
So So I can't tell you the extent of all the injuries. We're still in the process of evaluating everyone, but 2 of them are in critical condition currently from their injuries. So decontamination processes from our standpoint mean that we're constantly evaluating the patient, removing any chemical exposure from them, and making sure that we've got the opportunity to clean them before they come back and get treated. It can take anywhere from a few minutes to 15 minutes, and it depends on what the exposure is. For something like this, we have this exposure of lots of different chemicals, so we make sure that we basically decontaminate them for that.
Is that what some of the medical staff in the doors coming in and out in hazmat suits were doing? Can you tell us that there was medical staff in and out of those doors in hazmat suits? Is that what they were doing? Can you tell us what that process is like?
Yes, that's the decontamination process. So what we do is we actually take the patients, remove their clothing, remove all the chemicals from them, and then take them into hospital for treatment and evaluation.
You mentioned there could be blast injuries, there could be burn injuries. Can you tell us, if you can, what types of injuries you saw today from this explosion? We're live.
So we saw a little bit of everything today from all the patients. There were a fair amount of burn injuries, a pretty significant amount of blast injuries as well, from the penetrating and blunt injuries from the force of the explosion, as well as some crush injuries where some debris had fallen on the patients.
So what's the recovery like from some of these injuries?
It all depends on the injuries themselves. I think the biggest thing that you run into in something like this is it's based off how severe the injuries they have, and you always worry about brain injuries just like we would for every other trauma, and then making sure that we can treat their orthopedic injuries or other sources of bleeding. Luckily right now we don't have any patients that I can identify that are bleeding significantly, so it's managing all of those blunt injuries that we have.
Dr. Smith, you mentioned Louisville Fire was here with that decontamination process. We saw LMPD. Can you talk about the team effort that goes into a situation like this?
Yeah, when you have something like this, it requires the assistance of LMPD, Metro Fire, Metro EMS, our hospital staff. We are on point with the city as well as their emergency response. You really can't treat patients like this without having all of those resources available. And we're lucky to be able to have that type of relationship with everybody here in the city. And, you know, when as bad as this is, they got everyone to the hospital, and we've been able to decontaminate and take care of everybody. I don't know if we are over doctors now, but exposure to the type of chemicals what sorts of things do you worry about long-term that type of exposure? Yeah, luckily long-term exposure is not usually a problem in things like this. Where we do have a problem is in episodes like this, you don't know exactly everything that they've been exposed to. So we decontaminate them for basically anything and everything that is contained within any of the factories or processing, which is a little more extensive process, and that's why it's great to have Metro and have Metro Fire involved in that. But it's the only way to make sure that you've got everything taken care of.
Have you ever worked anything like this, the decontamination you're doing now?
So we have decontamination not infrequently. The most common reason to do decon is, for example, a car accident where you've got fuel or other fluids from the car that get into or onto the passengers. So it's not an infrequent process like that. But we've not had an explosion like this or had this type of decontamination in quite a while.
I may have missed this, but what happens to the body as time will progress to these folks?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is all related to what their injuries actually are from that perspective. And so you have to treat those injuries individually, and that gives them their best opportunities to do well if you do things like that.
Thank you.
You got it.
I missed a little bit due to the helicopter.
Sure.
Can you just give me a little bit more on that decontamination procedure and just how unusual that is? Or maybe it is usual, I don't know.
Yeah, so the decontamination procedure is something we do infrequently, but we do train for it. And in particular, something like this is a little more extensive, obviously, than a car accident where you get gasoline or diesel fuel exposure, which is the most common reason to decontaminate somebody. With things like this, with industrial chemicals, while we train for it, we have to basically assume that they have been contaminated with everything in the factory or in the area where they were this explosion. And then after we decontaminate them, we bring them in for overall care from that perspective.
I mean, obviously you train for this, but you never hope for it to happen. In a situation like this, what are things that you just got to have in place so that way people are treated quickly?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is disaster preparedness and disaster management. We train our teams constantly here at U of L Hospital. We work in conjunction with the city, with EMS, and with Louisville Police for all of those things. And really from us, it's about standing up, whether that would be from the shooting at Old National Bank. We were talking about the tornado in Henryville a number of years ago where we were able to respond to that disaster. It's a different scale, obviously, for something like this, but it's always what we train for and what we do here at the hospital.
Jason, during that time of the Old National Bank shooting, you're one of those voices that people were looking to. What do you want to say during this time to reassure people, like, yes, this big thing happened, but we are doing everything possible?
What I will tell people is really something like this just demonstrates the teamwork here within this community. And I think that's shown over and over again between what EMS, what fire, and what police do, the way they respond to things, their ability to get patients to us that we need to take care of, and the way that we can work with them to make sure that we do things like decontamination at the scene and bringing them here. You don't have that everywhere, and we are lucky to have that here in Louisville.
You're saying that the medical treatment is able to actually start before they get to the hospital?
Absolutely. And it starts from the scene and what they're able to do. I don't think you can say enough about what they do and how they respond to things.
Any other questions? All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, of course.
You have been listening to Dr. Jason Smith, the Chief Medical Officer for U of L Health, the Level 1 Trauma Center in Louisville. The most serious injuries are going to U of L. 7 of the 11 transported from the scene of the explosion at Givaudan Food Coloring went to U of L Health. 5 of them are stable, 2 of them are in critical condition, and he talked about the kind of injuries that they're treating there.
Yeah, he talked about these blast injuries. He was not able to tell us, some of the conditions of the people who are taken to his hospital, like which one is unstable and which one is the critical injury. But he said a lot of these injuries are burn injuries, blast injuries, blunt force injuries, chemical exposure injuries, and crushing injuries, from debris coming down from that explosion. And he did talk about these chemical exposures, a lot of chemicals coming in on these patients, and then they had to be stripped of their clothing and cleaned off before they can start any of that medical treatment. They have to be cleaned of these chemicals.
This explosion happened around 3 o'clock this afternoon at Givaudan Color Sense, a food coloring plant in the Clifton neighborhood. It could be felt from miles and miles and miles away. People telling us in the Camp Taylor neighborhood, at least 5 miles away. The Highlands, 2 miles away. It was interesting. We heard from our reporter, Katrina Nickel, who had talked to the owner at Quills. There's a Quills very near the scene off Frankfort Avenue. But there's 2 other Quills coffees within a stone's throw. One in Nulu, one in the Highlands. The one in Nulu didn't have any power. Right. And the one in the Highlands also felt the blast. So you can imagine just how many people's vehicles, homes, and businesses may have sustained damage because of this mighty, mighty, mighty explosion. And you're seeing the remnants of it smoldering now at the top left-hand side of your screen with the sun setting in the background.
And a scary day for a lot of people, because some of the people that Richard Essex was speaking to, he spoke to a lot of neighbors surrounding that plant, and this was a deja vu moment for them, because we know that this happened in 2003, another explosion at this same plant. Now, as for whether the reasoning is the same, that is going to be under investigation for quite some time. The fire chief talking about this, saying we will not know the cause of this explosion because it needs to be investigated. And it's still a danger there. Investigators can't get inside. We saw some of that smoke smoldering up into the sky still.
All right, for those of you just joining us, we want to welcome you in to WDRB News at 6.
It kind of felt like an earthquake, honestly. My car shook so bad that I thought someone actually hit my truck.
I can't believe that this distance. I thought somebody literally drove through the living room of my house. It was insane. I hope everybody's okay.
As we come on the air this afternoon for WDRB News at 6, we have breaking news in the city of Louisville. A major explosion at the Givaudan food coloring plant in the Clifton neighborhood happened about 3 hours ago. WDRB's Hayden Restevsky is giving us the closest picture our cameras have to that plant. Hayden?
Gilbert, I am on Frankfurt Avenue at a vantage point that is above that plant, and I can look down on it. It is getting much darker out here as the sun has set, but I want to give you a look at what I can see from my vantage point at this time. You can see that there is a glow of the sky high above mangled metal. There is a steam or water still coming off of the plant that exploded around 3 o'clock this afternoon. We are told by fire and emergency officials that it was, in fact, some kind of explosion with a structure collapse and a hazmat situation. We know that crews are still out here putting water on hot spots and monitoring the air for any chemicals. At this point, the latest update that we received from the city and emergency management said that they had not detected any high or dangerously high levels of chemicals in the air. However, I can tell you that I've been out here for several hours now, and even still, hours after this blast, I can feel it in the air. There's a faint smell in the air. You can almost feel it on your tongue and on your lips and on your cheeks. So again, at this point, we are being told that there are no dangerous levels of chemicals in the air. Neighbors who were asked to evacuate and shelter in place have been allowed to go on with their evenings as normal. A lot of them are cleaning up damage and glass blown out from windows. We know that there will be many days of investigating to find out what caused this blast. But for now, reporting live in Louisville in the Clifton neighborhood, Hayden Restevsky, WDRB News.
All right, Hayden, thank you. And as we can see, the sun is setting on that explosion scene. It's just absolutely devastating what we have seen in some of our live drone video. We are getting witness video. We want to take a look at this right now. It is from Amber Lee Carter. This is after the explosion.
Yeah, step back, son.
And so that kind of gives us the aftermath of the damage, right? So, and the wave-like effect from the explosion. You can see how close Amber Lee Carter was to the plant itself. It's the building that she is at is within the shadow of the plant, obviously, what looks like at least 1 or 2 blocks away. But then wherever she's standing, the windows are blown out there too.
Well, then next door, they're not. So, I mean, the weight of this explosion and how it is.
People, I want to thank you all for joining me. If you want to keep up on this, download WDRB TV News on your cell phone or your computer, or you can go to WDRB and watch it. But why did I bring it to you? Well, I had a little voice in my head. I guess God told me to bring it to you all. So that's why I brought it to you. It's local news to me, but you might know someone that lives there in Louisville or works at that place. So I want to thank you all. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe bell. If I had a computer, I can do it through StreamYard, and it'd be a whole lot better picture. But as you know, I'm on a fixed income between $800 to $900 a month. I live on a budget. I own my own house. I pay all of my bills. That's what I want to do, is bring you truth and justice for all. And I bring you about God, Because God wants you to make him great again by putting your faith in the God. And the thing I want you to do, people, you heard what that doctor said at U of L. Let's say some prayers for him. You probably know people that had got burnt, what they go through. So let's say prayers for them. Cotton picking cat! Sorry, the cat hit the tripod. So I want to thank you all for joining me, sitting in the background. This happened about 3 o'clock this afternoon in Louisville, Kentucky, 1900 block of Payne Street, which is close to Frankfort Avenue, where I worked back in the 70s. So I want to thank you all. Just say some prayers for them. Because God wants you to say prayers for them, helping through this. And their family. They're going to be off work for a while. So, I want to thank you. I'm thinking maybe come alive maybe one more time tonight. Maybe. If he does it, because he had to be in court at 3 o'clock today. And he'll probably come live on the way home back to Indiana. It might be for public safety. I don't know. We just have to wait and see. So God bless you all. Let's say prayers for those people that was in that explosion at 3 o'clock. Let's say prayers for them doctors at the U of L hospital. The #1 trauma center in Louisville, Kentucky. So I want to thank you all. And, let's say prayers for them. God wants you to say prayers for them to help them through this and their family. And you probably later on, or I forget the Louisville paper, maybe Courier Journal or Louisville Times. I forget what it is since I don't live there and don't get it anymore because money-wise. But I want to thank you all very much. God bless you all.